This podcast is brought to you by Tethered, the makers of the most badass saddle gear you can find. Of course, I've been using their Mantis saddle and Predator platform for some time now, but they have a few new things cooking. And the first thing to come out is the recently released Versa strap that they just came out with. This Versa strap is a woven, ultra high molecular weight fibers. It's usually what you would hear referred to as Dyneema or AM steel. And this, of course, is one of the strongest fibers on earth. It's used in a host of products. But if you're using a Mantis saddle already, you probably already recognize that AM steel is what your bridge is made out of. What's the benefit to the hunter? Well, it's super strong, and you do not sacrifice any weight issues. Literally, you get 4 of these straps, daisy chain straps, which would outfit all 4 of your sticks, and the total weight for all 4 of those straps is 4.4 ounces. That is versus, what you would usually get with your sticks with the buckle and et cetera, which is a lot more. That one strap will weigh a lot more than all 4 of your daisy chain Versa straps. So they have 3 different versions out that you can choose from. They have a mini Versa strap. This one is actually really well suited for those smaller Versa buttons. So those that, would come on the Lone Wolf custom gear sticks, hunting bee sticks, or if you're DIYing your sticks and using small Versa buttons, that is probably the one that you want. Again, 4.4 ounces for a 4-pack, and the average breaking strength is 1,500 pounds, which is crazy strong. The second option they have is the Versa strap. This one is 3/4 inches wide and weighs 4 grams per foot, so 0.14 ounces. And this one you would want to use more for those sticks that have larger Versa buttons, like the Lone Wolf sticks, Hawk Helium sticks, and things of that nature. Again, 4.4 ounces for a 4-pack and 1,500 pounds average breaking strength. They also have a poly Versa strap. Now, this one is 3/4 inch wide, and it weighs just a little bit more. When I say a little bit more, 5 grams per strap or 0.15 ounces. And this one is perfect for Versa buttons that are 1.25 inches in diameter or more at the widest point. So again, this would be good for your Lone Wolf sticks, Hawk Helium sticks, etc. These ones, however, aren't quite as strong as the mini Versa and the Versa strap, but the average weight breaking strength is 800 pounds, so well above what you would need for sticks. So if you'd like to learn more about their Versa strap options or any of their saddle gear, head over to tetherednation.com. That's TETHRDNATION.com and check it out. We're also brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. Skull Brew is a company that my wife and I started to give back to conservation. Every purchase that is made, 10% of all of our profits go back to support nonprofit conservation organizations like RMEF, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, QDMA, and the Nature Conservancy. When you choose a product and you head to checkout, you choose which organization receives your portion of the donation. We recently launched a new product, so we have now a light roast for all you light roast coffee drinkers out there. It is a Ethiopia Harar, which is a little higher in caffeine, so it starts your engine in the morning. It's killer hot, or if you're like me, I really dig it as cold brew. So head over to skullbrewcoffee.com and check it out and pick yourself up a bag today. This podcast is also brought to you by Gumleaf USA. And you might ask yourself, what does Gumleaf make? Well, I'm here to tell you. They make some killer rubber boots. Most whitetail hunters, of course, are wearing rubber boots throughout the course of the season, especially if you are hunting some of the gnarly, nasty, swampy areas that I'm hunting. You need a boot that's not going to leak. And just unfortunately, over the years, I've not found a rubber boot, quote unquote, that could stand up to the beating that I was going to give it. And usually through, midway through the season, I end up with leaks and wet feet, which doesn't help the cold feet situation. So I'm giving Gumleaf boots a try, and I'm glad I did. I've had a chance to wear these out and do a little bit of scouting. They're super comfortable, but the kicker is that they are made out of 85% natural rubber, which won't crack. So you don't have to worry about dealing with those, water ingress, and those cracks that are around your toes where you have a lot of bending going on. They also accommodate up to a 16-inch calf in circumference. So if you're like me and have larger calves that are disproportional to the rest of your body, these boots will fit. So if you're interested in checking out some new boots, or if you're tired of getting wet feet and are about to give up on rubber boots in general for whitetail hunting, you might want to do yourself a favor and head over to gumleafusa.com. I'm actually wearing the field wellies, which are non-insulated, so going the non-insulated route this year. So check them out at gumleafusa.com. Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 132. Today, John and I are talking about his recent trip west, a quick whitetail update, and we answer your listener questions. So stay tuned. All right. What is going on out there? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you all are doing good out there in the whitetail world. 1 week closer. A little jealous of those out there that have Western hunts planned, because you will be hitting the timber much earlier than me. Well, I shouldn't say much earlier than me, because my season will come in mid-ish September here in the eastern part of PA. But I'm already kind of chomping at the bit, and I think part of it is that usually this time of year I'm like absolutely scrambling to finish stuff up. And I'm still on the fence of putting one last food plot in back at the family property, at the one smaller family property. I frost seeded some clover this year. The clover came up like gangbusters. I hung cameras whenever I was back the last time, which I want to say was probably the end of May-ish, and I haven't been back since. So those cameras have just been kind of hanging, soaking. There was a buck bed that I'd found, which I'd had thought I knew where one was. There was one there. And so there's some cameras kind of monitoring that general area. So I'm looking forward to getting back and checking it. So it's probably a good thing that I'm not back there, because it's keeping me from getting into the timber and boogering anything up. But I'm kind of on the fence as to whether or not I'm going to do anything with that field. I'm sure at this point it hasn't been mowed. It wasn't like I was really, I didn't go back to take care of it, mow it, spray it, or anything like that. It was just one of those things where I had a fall plot in there last year. I frost seeded it with clover, and it was more of one of those things. Well, whatever comes up is going to come up, and that's just going to have to be, good enough, because I wasn't going to have a lot of time to get back there. And then when I did go back, there was clover all over the place. So I was kind of the mind where I was just going to kind of let it be. But I've kind of been on the fence as to going back and doing an overseed of some real world oats. Not really 100% sure why. I just feel like I should. But in reality, when I think about it, I don't know that I'm going to get back to really. The truth is I may not get back to that property and hunt it at all this year. Really just depends on what's on camera, just because, for me, it is a 3.5 hour drive, and I have a couple really good deer that are close to my house that, unless there's something that's exponentially better, I don't know that I'll make it back there. Then, of course, I'll be headed to Iowa at the end of October, beginning of November for a couple weeks. And by the time I get back here to Pennsylvania, that part of the state, the archery season will be over and done with, and I could go back and hunt at late archery. But I typically don't make my way back there to hunt late archery. I usually stick around home and do that. So that's why I'm a little uneasy, because this year I've managed to get all my prep work done. Even this year with modding some gear and stuff like that, I've kind of got all my ducks in a row. Things are finished. The one last thing I do need to do is I need to build a couple arrows, another set of arrows. So be building up some day 6 arrows here in the not so distant future, to kind of get my hunting arrows set up, because the ones I've been shooting recently, of course, of what I'm using at the range and stuff. And I typically like to go through and build a fresh set and kind of test them all out, and make sure everything's flying the way I want them to fly. And then I pull out the 3 that I felt shot the best, and those are the ones that go into the quiver. The last thing I've been kind of doing, and I think I mentioned it on the last podcast, was just going through my climbing mechanism and stuff like that. But not to harp on that. That was one thing I did do this weekend, just trying to get more slick, and getting in and out of the tree with the new system that I'm using, the cane method that I'm using. So I did that yesterday. A little bit out in the heat, just to kind of practice, to make sure everything felt good. I finally got my rigger's belt in the mail, so I was able to kind of use that and kind of have the full system, because before I was using the climbing situation, the cane method, I was using that, but I was still using the lineman's rope because I hadn't had the rigger's belt yet. So yesterday was the first time where I had rigger's belt, steps, like everything I needed, and was able to climb and was super comfortable doing it. And it's a really quick, slick way to climb. So I'm super stoked about that. I did get to the range yesterday too, or I guess this past weekend, and was shooting my bow. I shoot a fair amount here at the house, but I wanted to get to the range. And last time I was there just a few weeks ago with the bow hunting fiend. He and I were there with Wilson, my buddy Wilson McSwain. And we got out there and did some shooting a couple weeks ago, so I hadn't had a chance to really stretch out and shoot some longer distances at my house. I'm able to shoot up to about 35 yards, which is plenty, for shooting at whitetails. But I like to get out and stretch it out a little further. If I have confidence out to further distance, out to like 50-ish yards or whatever, I'm shooting well out to that distance, and I feel really good about what I call my quote unquote, effective killing range for whitetails in that, 35 to 40 yard range. So got a chance to get out and do that yesterday. But the big news was that, of course, I know that I mentioned I had drawn an Iowa tag. but I had yet to receive said Iowa tag in the mail. And I got a delivery on Friday, and my Iowa tag was included in that mail delivery. So it is official. I am a real live boy that is going to Iowa, and pretty pumped up about it. John and I touch on that just a little bit in the podcast, so I won't really talk about that much. I won't belabor that point any longer. And overall, I don't think I'm going to belabor this up front any longer. John and I have a cool podcast for you today. We got your listener questions that you guys sent in, so thank you for doing that. Always, love to have you guys write questions in, and John and I really kind of enjoy answering them. So do appreciate you guys getting involved and engaging with us. So that was super awesome. So we answered those, and then John recently actually did a trip out west for a couple weeks, and he'll talk about that a little bit. It was with a cast of characters, everyone from Jason Matzinger and Sam Soholt, and they went out, and John was doing his best impression, I think, of a river runs through with a fly rod. So we'll let him kind of talk about that. And then we do have a quick whitetail update that we just basically, kind of hit the highlights of what we have going on for whitetails right now. And as I'd mentioned, for me, it's really sitting biding my time and finishing some final tweaks to my gear, and then get ready to rock and roll. So without further ado, we'll get John, and we'll get this session cracking. All right, welcome back to another episode of The Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, and I am joined by my brother from another mother, Johnny, by God, Utah Mulligan. What's going on, dude?
What's happening, brother?
I always like to add by God to things. I don't know why.
By God, that's the PG version of like MF or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. I don't drop those on here, but I sure as hell say them at work, which is kind of interesting. But West Virginia is when I really like to lay on the by God. Like it's West by God, Virginia. Like that just feels good. Feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's going on, man? What's new? So we got some hunting related stuff to get into today, because we're creeping right around the corner from the season, getting started. It's, just about, when this thing goes live, it'll be less than a month for a lot of folks out west to kick off their seasons and stuff, whether it's, whitetail, mule deer, elk, whatever the case might be. But you just got back from the west, so I figured we could do just a quick recap of that before we jump into hunting stuff, dude. So you've been a traveler, and you have now turned into a fly fisherman.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I've turned into one per se, but so I just got back. We went out to Utah, the Utah TAC. I went out there with the Prime Archery guys, and we worked on some photos and video for an upcoming project that I can't disclose any information on whatsoever, but it is badass. And
nice.
So basically the trip, like I said, was hosted and kind of put together by Prime Archery and Mr. Sam Soholt. And what we did is we all met at the Utah Park City TAC. So this is the first year that it was in Park City versus being in Snowbird. So we did that for 4 days, and then which, by the way, Sam was out there with his bus, and he was slinging, hats and shirts and stickers and
public land tees and stuff.
Public land tees stuff, with his brother Josh, and their dad Jerry was out there. Jerry's old school hustler, man. He grabs the crowd and brings them back to the booth. You know what I mean? It's
Nice.
Pretty funny. Yeah. So they were hustling and did some good stuff with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, made another big donation to those guys. And then we left. We kind of zigzagged our way en route to Big Sky, Montana for the Big Sky TAC. But we hit a bunch of rivers in Idaho, picked up our fishing license there, did some fly fishing there. And then we continued on to Montana. And before we started TAC, we ended up doing some fishing in Montana. A non-resident fishing 2-day fishing license in Montana is going to set you back about 50 bones.
Whoa, nice.
Yeah, a little steep for 2 days, but nonetheless, had to put some flies in the water, and some of the guys caught a lot. There was one day that I did not go with them fishing, and they ended up hitting a particular river and just hammered it, man.
Really?
It was just nonstop. And I'm like, yeah, go figure. The day I don't go, like, so I
Right.
might have been their bad luck, but
Well, maybe, just maybe you had poor fishing luck because the whitetail season is going to be balls out.
that could very well could be. And I'll take that trade off any day.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was first time I've ever been fly fishing. I've never even held one in my hand before. So there was a little bit of a learning curve. I got some lessons from a real good friend of mine out there, and she gave me some one-on-one tutorial about just literally 10 and 2. And as she called it, tick tock, you know? So that helped a ton. And, it didn't teach me how to fish. It taught me how to keep flies in the water.
Right.
And, more, it's like time on stand, more flies in the water, better chance you got to catch and fish. So that was awesome, because had I not had that, I probably would have been tangled up and,
Right.
Choked myself out, with the line. But
drown yourself with your own fishing line. Like,
oh yeah. Yeah.
I was waiting for the Instagram post of you with like a fish hook, like in your ear or or in your neck or something.
Yeah. Screw that. But what's funny is how cold that water is.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, it's July and it's 100 degrees outside, right? We're all burnt like to a crisp, and that water was so cold. I mean, I'm guessing that water was 40, 50 degrees, something like that. Maybe colder, but,
damn, mountain water, mountain runoff.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was so cold even that time of year, but we ended up finally making it to Big Sky, got the prime boost set up, and we did that, the tax shoot stuff for 3 days, and we packed up. We all headed back to Jason Matzinger's house and hung out, had one last night of just kind of hanging out, and was so cool, man. It was a nice way to cap off the trip. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on, and we were doing photos and doing video, and we were trying to fish, and we were camping and, tent camping, and with Jason had his Montana canvas wall tent set up, and some guys were sleeping on the bus and some guys were in the tents, and it was all just kind of a blur. And then that last night, everybody's just dog tired, but it was cool to sit back and relax with everybody. And at the end of the day, not to get like all sappy on everybody, but
get sappy.
It's really
it's okay.
neat. Well, it's really neat to like sit down and drink a beer and laugh and cut up with people some people were from Texas, some people were from Michigan, some from Montana, me from Iowa, Sam originally from the Dakota areas, and then now living in Montana. It's just so cool that people from all over the country, and people can still all sit together and laugh and cut up and trade stories and have a good time. A bunch of like-minded people, and it was just real chill and real laid back. So it was a blast. I never liked leaving Montana, but it was time to come back home.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet. Yeah. I know I don't know, man, any of those places out West, it's once you get there, it's the idea of leaving. It's like as soon as you leave, you're just kind of like looking at the calendar, wondering what, how quickly you can get back.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's, well, even my wife, she was like, I called her one day and she's like, wow, you're alive. And I'm like, what? And she's like, it's the first time I've heard from you in 3 days.
And really?
Yeah. I'm like, well, in my defense, I didn't even have cell service. Right. There were several days where we were camping that I didn't have cell service. And if I did, it's because we went into town to go get, a bag of ice or firewood or, something like that. And I'd have service for 5 minutes and I would like shoot her a text. I'm alive.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of cell service to be had out there in a lot of those places,
when you're joining the city.
Yeah, exactly. Until you hit those little towns and stuff like that, you'll pick up service for a couple miles and then it's gone again,
Yep. But, and, to give Sam and Public Land Tees, him and his brother, Josh, they're really kicking ass. And to give those guys a plug, it's amazing. You see a lot of conservation groups and people that are like, oh yeah, I'm doing a wounded warrior hunt, or I'm doing this. And everybody's doing these noble causes, but I got to see this firsthand, him write a check and give checks out. $2,000 here, $5,000 here. I mean, I watched him, give out like 10 grand in the time that we were together. And that's just super cool, man, because that's impactful. That makes a big difference,
It does. Well, I mean, I think too, it's like, Sam's just not to, jump on the Sam Love train. I mean, Sam's just a rad dude. You know what I mean? He's approachable. He's easy to talk to. And even whenever I was getting ready to kick off the Skull Brew Coffee thing, it was, I called him and just said, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? Have any advice? And I don't know, we talked for probably like an hour one night, and he just gave me some advice on how he kind of started the public land teas things, some people to talk to, some people to connect with. And, he said, he gave me a quote, because we talked about a host of things, and the quote that he gave me, he said, conservation doesn't have competition. And I thought that was just a really kind of poignant quote, because whether you're podcasting or you have a t-shirt company, a coffee company, or whatever, and you're in the conservation game, it's, people get protective of their spaces, their little spaces, their little fiefdoms that they want to rule. And, and his point was basically, it's like, hey, if it's for the greater good, it shouldn't matter who you're partnering with and that you work with X, Y, and Z company. It's like, if this company over here is willing to support the same cause and idea, why couldn't you work with them?
Oh, spot on.
And that was kind of his approach. And I just thought that was really, really kind of cool. And I think that's the kind of mind frame, that I think that you were kind of, when you were talking about having a bunch of like-minded people in the same place, talking about the same stuff, cutting up, enjoying each other. It's like, it's that idea that kind of is, that same idea kind of starts to seep into everyday people, right? They take their cues from things that they see outside of their own sphere. And whenever those folks are playing nice in the sandbox and doing the right things, it's a lot easier for people to get on board and do the right things themselves.
And that's, and that's what I was going to say too. Like, when it comes to like my photography and stuff like that, I don't mind, helping guys out, but if you're not careful, you'll spend 80 hours a week helping other people out.
Yeah. 100%.
And you're not working and making a living, you know what I mean? But, and like there may be times I might not want to disclose a particular location that I did on a photo shoot, or maybe give out my camera settings or something like that. But like you just said, when it comes to conservation, there was a lot of photographers on that trip, and obviously Sam's a photographer as well. That's where the bulk of his money, comes from, his living.
Right.
And he opened up his bus, let everybody come in and charge batteries, because everybody was there for the greater good. Like you said, conservation has no competition. And Sam's always been one of those guys that, I know my space, and I know there's just certain questions that, you don't ask people, because, you just don't do it. Like, you don't ask somebody how much money they make. And
right.
You don't ask people like, how hot their wife is, but but like
that would be a really awkward one.
Yeah, exactly. But like, you can go to people like Sam and other guys that are in conservation. You can say, hey, I got this idea. What do you think's the best way to kick this off? Like, you're not trying to steal their thunder. You're trying to add fuel to the fire. So, yep.
Right.
Good points.
Exactly. And you also don't ask for, if someone's giving you some help with some deer hunting stuff, you don't say, hey, where's that spot you hunt? You know what I mean? It's like you say, hey, I'm thinking of going to this area. Any tips you have? You know what I mean? Or I'm looking at a specific spot. Have you had any experience in that area? It's like you kind of give some parameters and let them kind of give you what they're willing to give you, but you don't say, hey man, you think you could drop me some GPS pins of where you put where your locations are at? I'd love to go check those out. Like, that's not really the right way to go about learning a new area necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
But speaking of hunting, man, we'll turn the page. So first off, I'm glad you had a killer time. I was totally jealous. I did trade a text message with Sam at one point and ask him if he showed up with a Hills Brother can. And I knew you would appreciate the River Runs Through reference. So
that's great.
Yeah. And he said no, that you had, and I said good, and then I just like, you boys have a good time, and then that was it. But I thought that I needed to throw that one out there because it was a movie reference, and since you were new to fly fishing, but which, by the way, as far as that movie goes, we did fish the river that they filmed a lot of the, the scenes where
Brad Pitt is like in the water, and his brother realizes that his brother had become, a prolific fisherman or whatever.
Right.
We were fishing that same river.
Nice. That's
Yeah,
awesome. You
pretty
should
cool.
you should have passed out, stark naked with your ass in the air and got an ass burn, just like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
movie. That would have been
yeah,
choice.
yeah, yeah.
Nice.
Pretty.
But so we'll switch gears to hunting, and we
Uh-huh.
do have, so for everyone out there listening, as you guys, most of you are probably well aware, John and I do enjoy a good Q&A session where we ask you guys to write in some questions. We just, I don't know, we get a kick out of doing it because it makes us think of things that we don't necessarily think about otherwise, and
Hmm.
actually it makes me contemplate some choices that I'm making and maybe how I think about things, which is super cool. But before
Yep.
we jump into those, quick update on the hunting front for each of us, and then we'll dive into the questions. So, what's going on? Like, so you're back from Montana, you're back
Yep.
in Iowa.
Hmm.
Where are you at on like a scale of 1 to 10, getting geeked out for deer season?
Um, Normally it would be a 9,
Mm-hmm.
but
Niner.
but I have a black bear hunt in Canada coming up, in 2 weeks. So, um, I would be dumb if I, wasn't kind of immersing myself in that and getting my gear together that I'm going to need for the trip, because I'm going to drive up to that. It's going to be about a 15-hour haul each way.
Right.
But just, going through the checklist, make sure I got my passport, my bear spray, what camo I want to take, what systems I want to have, and what camera stuff I want to do, and how I kind of, how I want to tell the story of the hunt to make an Arrow Wild episode and that kind of stuff. So, getting the details, making sure that I pick up a couple of logs of grizzly and a bottle of Sailor Jerry
Right.
before I go, so I can get across the border duty free.
Right.
So, yep, planning that kind of stuff out. And then also, as soon as I get back, like literally, I get home and I've got 24 hours to unpack, do laundry, and then repack for a different kind of a trip. But I'll be going to Alberta with Ozonics.
Yeah.
But I'm not the hunter. I'm just the filmer photo guy, and going up there on a velvet whitetail hunt to photo and film a couple of commercials and stuff for those guys. So then I finally get back to Iowa September 2nd, and it'll be like gangbusters, man. As soon as I touch down, it is 100% whitetail through the end of the season.
Yeah.
So
Nice. So do you have anything that you're doing right now for getting ready, or do you kind of have everything set and ready to go, and you just kind of have to do your last checks and, checking off lists whenever you get back in September?
Yeah. So, I've actually got a couple of sets already hung on some food plots, and they'll be sets that I'll sit them sparingly throughout the entire season, early season to late season. A couple of cameras soaking on the leaves, and got some mineral sites going, that I've been checking in. Next week, I am going to hang probably another set or two. Rut sets.
Right.
I'm just going to go ahead and get them up, get them out of the way. And so I know that they're there, get them trimmed out. And then I'm going to really start diving into setting some more cameras on public.
Yes.
Yeah. But then I'll be honest, like I wouldn't say I've scaled back my cameras. I like putting out a lot of cameras now, but I put a lot more cameras out in what I call scrape season.
Right. That's interesting that you say that, because there's a Q&A session or a Q&A question related to that. So
yep. So I won't dive into that, but yeah, I mean, that's I did just go spray one of my food plots with Roundup. The weeds were just taking over my my soybean plot.
Right.
I stopped out there today to check on it, and everything's dying off, and the only thing green is just my real world beans. So we're good.
That's a good sign, man. It's I'm kind of in the same boat. Everything's out for me. It's now just a waiting game. I did do one card pull, and I think we talked about that before. I have a good deer. I actually have two good deer that I know of the whereabouts. Lots can change between now and then, but it's just a good feeling to know that, there's a handful of good deer. PA, as you know, you've spent enough time here with trade shows and have enough buddies in Pennsylvania that it's finding a good deer on a piece of property in Pennsylvania isn't necessarily a given. Even a decent one. So when you do have a couple good ones floating around, it's always makes you breathe just a little sigh of relief, going, okay, I'm not going to be scrambling, hopefully, as the season hits to try to figure out what my plan is. I can actually start to make one maybe a little bit earlier. So I do have to check one other camera just because it's on a new piece and I don't know anything about it. I did a speed scout of it and I need to see if I even have the camera in the right spot. And that'll probably happen this weekend. And then from there, it's like I'll kind of let them alone. And then kind of similar to you, it'll be, once they start transitioning and so forth, I'll start moving cameras to get ready for, September when they, go hardhorn and stuff like that. And that'll probably happen end of August-ish, and put those in place so I can just let them alone. But that's kind of the Cliff Notes quick version update of what's going on for deer hunting, shooting my bow a lot and getting my climbing gear and mechanisms and stuff in place. But otherwise, just biding my time, man, and waiting. On my scale, I'm probably at I'm at an 8 already, I think. Like you and I talked yesterday on my drive back from work, and I think I yelled in the phone once, all hyped up on the drive, getting pumped up for deer season already. But I might need to try to relax myself a little bit because I got a little ways to go. So
yeah,
I'll try to maintain. But let's go ahead and jump into some Q&A. And I'm going to launch this first question over to you only because I have a vested interest in your answer since I'm coming out. Well, that's the other thing. I don't know that I've even given the update on the podcast that I officially drew my Iowa tag and will be coming to hunt with one Johnny by God Utah Mulligan.
So it's awesome. I remember when I sent you a message and I'm like, hey dude, jump on the Iowa site and, confirm that you drew. And you're like, yeah, I don't think the results are coming out for a few days. And I'm like, hey, jackass, I'm the Iowa resident. Go check the site right now.
Well, the bummer is I was up at that, well, it wasn't a bummer, but I was at the BHA thing in Morris, PA with 0 cell service. So I couldn't even check. I had just enough service to get random text. So I was even surprised I got your text. You know what I mean? And then I was scrambled really quick and was trying to get on. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I don't have enough service to even get on the site to look. So I had to wait till the weekend was over. I think I actually texted you whenever I got off the mountain because I checked while I was driving and I was like, hell yeah, I got my tag. So it was a little delay for a guy who wanted to draw an Iowa tag so bad. I wasn't real good about staying on top of when I was going to find out. So, so now I'm just waiting for it to come in the mail, and I actually need to call tomorrow because it should have arrived this week. I think was the 4th week. So hopefully it'll be in the mail soon. But so that's the other big news that I had. But we won't delay. I know we've teased this Q&A 3 different times now, so we'll just go ahead and dive into it. So my vested interest question is. And I don't have folks' names, so sorry guys that wrote in. I didn't have time to grab the names, but listen closely, and you'll know which question was yours. And if you did write in, we appreciate you guys taking the time to do so. So the first question is: if you could only hunt 1 week or a handful of days of the rut or November, however you want to frame it, what dates would you hunt?
I'm going to be really greedy. Okay. And I'm going to say, was there a limit on how many days, or if I just box in a group of days?
Box in a group of days. He says roughly a week, but we can do a week plus plus or minus on each side.
Okay. So if I used my vacation time correctly, October 31st to November 15th. Mm-hmm. That 2 week block. If I did not use or I don't have a lot of V time, November 7th, 8th, 9th, those 3 days have proven to be the most effective for me for seeing piles of bucks running around. But if anybody has been listening to the podcast for, the last 2 years and will recall, I'm not the biggest fan of the rut. Mm-hmm. I'm more of a strategic. I want to locate the critter. I want to go in and I want to go kill him. I don't want to have it on chance,
right?
So to speak. But again, if I have to say, hey, boss man, it's February and I need to let you know what days I need off for the hunting season,
Right.
then yeah, I'm going to put all my eggs in one basket and I'm going to go rut hunting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that November 7th, 8th, 9th, plus or minus a couple of days, before, and after that block, it's just magical.
Right.
You know?
Right. I think for me, it's I'll give the smart ass answer first, and then I'll give like the legit answer. I guess the smart ass answer would be if you know the area that you're hunting really well, whatever dates you know that those are going to come in. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like if you're talking about the rut, you know what I mean? Like if you have a property that you're familiar with, I would pay attention to your trail camera data, especially around doe bedding areas, and kind of figure out when they're cycling in and cycling
Yep.
out. So you kind of can start to map your does and when they come in and out, because as long as those does continue to use the same bedding areas year over year over year, those things should turn on plus or minus a day on either side, year over.
Yep.
The non-smart ass answer, I think, for me would be, I think it's state dependent, right? So for me, in talking to you, coming out to Iowa, I knew that I wanted to be there for the first 2 weeks of November. I knew I
Yep.
didn't want to do last week of October into the first week of November. I knew that my odds and my activity was probably going to be better if I had more time on the backside of that, like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12
Yep.
kind of time frame.
Yep.
So I timed it to where I would be out there, the first full 2 weeks of November. I think I'm there through like the 14th, 15th, something like that. I think I'm leaving the 15th. So I should have hit that prime time, which is killer.
Oh yeah, it's money.
Yeah. And then if I'm going to Ohio, I'm probably, depending on which spot in Ohio I'm going to, I really like that 6, 7, 8, and 9 day. Just the one area that I hunt, like I know that ridge turns on religiously during that time frame, and I see bucks anytime I hunt there, like no questions asked. In Pennsylvania, it's a little bit different. Like Pennsylvania is weird. Like the eastern part of the state where I live, I honestly think, and the bummer is like I'm usually not here to hunt it because I'm usually in Ohio, or this year I'll be in Iowa. But it actually is the best during gun season, which is like the weekend, like after, or like the week before Thanksgiving, which in PA, you can't hunt the week. Like there's a week between the end of archery season and the beginning of rifle season, which is probably the best week for the rut in Pennsylvania. And in my opinion, it's like the third week in November, except on the eastern part of the state, like that stays open. So that to me is probably like the best week in PA. In the western part of PA, it's that second week of November, or I would actually probably start to prioritize the time frame right around Halloween versus like into November if I was going to prioritize the timing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a little bit state dependent on where you're at.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, the further you go down south, maybe a little sooner, maybe a little later.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure.
I can definitely tell you like where you're coming in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the last 3 years, the most activity and the big bucks on their feet are between November 7th and November 12th.
Nice. When we talked to Don Higgins too, Don, he would tell you he wants the dates right after Thanksgiving. Those are his favorite rut dates. If he's going to hunt rut and he was looking for a big buck to get on his feet, he's like, man, he's like that when they start to get ready to cycle in for the second time and the first batch of does have been bred and the does that didn't get bred the first round are coming in. He's like, you got a lot fewer does and a lot more traveling the big boys have to do to find them.
Sure. So, and it makes sense. I know a lot of people that love that Thanksgiving time frame, and just for me, the biggest buck I ever saw in the hoof was 3 years ago on November 12th, midday, at 2 p.m., cruiser. And he was downwind of a doe bedding area. 2 years ago, second biggest buck I've ever seen in my life was on November 8th. And he was checking a scrape line at 8:30 in the morning. And last year on November 8th, is the most magical day I've ever seen in the woods in my life. And then I killed a buck at 4:30 or 5 p.m. that day, but could have killed other bucks, all morning long.
Yeah, that day was just ridiculous.
Yeah. Insane.
Yeah.
Insane. That, you got to have days like that to like, it almost like refires you back up again. Like I'm good for another couple of seasons,
Yeah.
like
it's like at the end of the season, whenever you're ground into the dirt, like mentally, physically, emotionally, especially if you've had kind of a year, maybe you didn't see the deer you wanted to see, or maybe you shanked one and like missed one or flew one over its
yep,
back or whatever. Well, anything could happen, right? It's bow
sure.
hunting. So there's a lot of things, a lot of variables.
Yep.
And it's like you're thinking to yourself when you're climbing into your tree and you're just like, good God, why do I do this? I'm up at like 0 dark 30. I'm getting no sleep. I'm not seeing any critters. I'm just looking for proof of life at this point. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, boom, like someone flips the rut switch and it's just like magic.
Yep.
And then it's like exactly like you said, you're like, oh yeah, I could stay out here for 3 years straight, no problem, just for the chance to see that one time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But so as we did a little foreshadowing earlier, I think we covered that one pretty well. So I think the net is that there's a lot of good dates. Think about where you're hunting. Do you have camera intel that's telling you what might be good and when? And then just pay attention when you're in the timber hunting spots. You'll kind of start to be able to feel out when those woods are starting to turn on and so forth if you spend enough time in it.
Yep.
So the next one is we did some foreshadowing about scrapes because you were talking about transitioning your cameras to scrapes. So this one's not specific to cameras necessarily, but I thought we could take a wider approach to it to talk about scrapes in general. But the question is specifically, do we use mock scrapes and how do you set them up? And I'm interested to hear your answer to this because I'll admit I'm not great at using mock scrapes, but I have an approach I'm going to try this year as a as a new way to kind of hopefully increase my inventory or my success on my mock scrapes. So how do you use them?
I love them.
I know that you love them. We've talked.
I love them. So any area that I can get in and out of really easy, that I can check. I love field edge scrapes. You know what I mean? I've never done mock scrapes in the like deep into the timber. But I love mock scrapes on field edges. And a lot of it for me is very much inventory, I'm checking to see what new bucks are going to start cruising through that area. And maybe there's some bucks in the area that I just didn't get on trail cam throughout the year. Maybe it'd be on a mineral site or in a food plot or something like that. But a combination of, I like using the Hodag licking sticks. I like using those in the middle of food plots. And if you've got, say, a 2-3 acre food plot, and this is just dumb luck, right? I have noticed over the years, if let's say I had a clump of weeds in a food plot that my Roundup didn't get, or maybe I had a down limb that fell into a food plot, a big branch, I just kept noticing, like, it didn't matter where the deer or, the bucks or the does came into the food plot. There was about a 70% chance that at some point they were going to end up walking by or standing near that tall clump of weeds or tree limb or branch or something that was laying out there. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? And then I started to realize, like, it's becoming a scent concentration point, Yep. So, I had a conversation with Jeremy Moore from Hodag, and Jeremy's like, well, I've got something brand new, and basically sent me essentially like prototypes. And I'm like, dude, this is like, what perfect timing. Like, I can't wait to try this. So I use the Hodag licking sticks in food plots. It's either that or run 500 trail cameras. Now I can run 1 or 2. Field edges, I love doing mock scrapes. I do them a lot. I've traditionally used Mrs. Dopey.
Yep.
He's local to me, and Sam's he's a pretty damn good wealth of information. He's killed 200 inchers. So he's got a lot of intel that comes with that bottle. You know what I mean? Yep. And this year I am doing something. I noticed Don Higgins using the ropes.
Yep.
When I was out at Don's personal farm, walking around with him, came across one of the ropes and saw not just the rope, but like the location that he had the rope in. And it made a lot of sense as to where he had it. So I went to the hardware store last month and bought a couple of 10-foot strands of, some old nasty looking Jack Sparrow rope. And I'm going to be using that as well this year for some mock scrapes. But yeah, I'm a huge on mock scrapes. I love it. I have identified so many bucks. I've attracted new bucks. I've had deer that I ran cameras all year long, never got a picture of them, and then 24 hours of starting a mock scrape, brand new buck,
right?
That I'd never seen before. So yeah, I'm a big believer in them.
Yeah. So I want to believe it's kind of it's kind of like
Santa Claus.
Yeah, that or like aliens. It's like I want to believe. And no, I've seen it work too many times for other people. And I think again I think some of this stuff depends on where you're at too. You know what I mean? Sure. I think in some states with a lot of pressure and stuff like that, some of this stuff doesn't work. It's not that it doesn't work. It may just not work as well, right? So, in Illinois or Ohio or Iowa or wherever where there's not quite as much pressure, it's like some of these things will draw deer in maybe in more numbers. It's not saying it doesn't work in PA. It's just like just making up numbers. But like if 10 comes to check out yours, 2 might check mine out. Doesn't mean it didn't work. It just the volume is different, right?
Sure.
So I think my frame of reference might have been a little off earlier whenever I was trying to use them. I've just not had a ton of great success with it. But this year, much like you're talking with Don, the ropes, I'm actually going to give it another go this year, and I'm actually going to use the model that Jeff Sturgis uses. And what he likes to do is something very similar to Don, only what he's found has worked for him well is actually using, he'll cut like a 10-foot branch off a tree that has some decent weight to it so they can't just knock it around real easy, so they can actually press up against it and use some paracord to tie that off of a branch and hang that down over an area that he wants to create a scrape. He doesn't use any lure. He uses the old-fashioned, what you might call the bush light version of a mock scrape, which is just take a leak in it before you walk away, and then let it be. And it works for him. And that fits more like my mold probably because I've tried just about everything else at this point except that. So I think this year that's going to be my approach is the Jeff Sturgis approach. And then, I don't have a whole lot more to say on that only because I'll have my results, I guess, here this fall. But mine though aren't going to be necessarily on field edges. Mine are actually going to be a little further in the timber. Most of this is going to be, public areas, at least here on the eastern part of the state where you can still use those things. The western part of PA, you're not able to use lures and stuff like that because of, CWD reasons and stuff like that. So it's only really out this way on the public that I hunt that I'm going to be able to do some stuff like that. So I'm hoping I get some decent results. I'm hoping a couple of the good deer that are around come around and check it out because, like I said, I want to believe, but at this point I've just not had a lot of success. But so
yep.
It'll be interesting. I'm going to give it another go. If it doesn't work this time, I'm not quite sure what I'll do at that point. I might just move to Iowa just so I can run mock scrapes. Which wouldn't be a terrible idea. But so the next question, this one, I'm going to flip this one around on you, John. You ready?
Yep.
All right. So this fella here asked if we could please speed through Jackson County, Ohio, so he can pull us over and bullshit with us, which I said is a possibility when I come through Ohio on my way to Iowa. So if I do get pulled over, hopefully it's this fella, which would be a lot nicer. But
yeah.
I'm going to ask you as the former cop, right? Have you ever pulled someone over and was like, hey, this guy's kind of a cool dude. I kind of just want to chat this guy up for a second.
I don't know. I mean, hold on a second. My phone just did something weird. I have pulled people over before that I'm like, wow, that's job security. Right. I've had that happen a few times. I've pulled over some interesting people. I mean, back home, we had a lot of the Bengals players and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm trying to think, I have pulled people over in their vehicle doing things that they probably shouldn't have been doing. They weren't necessarily breaking the law. They just probably shouldn't have been doing it. But
Right.
no, I can't say that I've ever pulled anybody over and been like, "Oh man, this is a cool cat." I'm glad I pulled this person over.
Right.
Uh, you
Yeah.
know,
I doubt.
we we had, this is kind of funny. So back in the day, um, we had a couple of like the eternal bachelors,
Right.
that were cops, and there was actually some girls that admitted to like speeding through the town and hoping
That's
that
hilarious.
particular cops would pull them over. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
I'm like, geez, you ever just try to go to like the bar? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like it's cheaper.
Right. Yeah. Way cheaper, no points, and
Right.
keeps your insurance premiums low. How's that?
Yeah. That's funny. How close is Jackson to Jurassic? That's where I'll be.
Uh,
That's where I'll be this weekend.
yeah, I'm not sure exactly where Jackson's. I feel like it's where Jurassic. Actually, I don't think it's far from Zanesville, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. I
I
think
don't
it's
think it is.
I think
Right.
it's just a little south of
Yep.
Zanesville, if I'm not mistaken.
Here's my statement for life. Anybody that wants to hang out with me or you, like, I don't think I'm that cool. So if somebody wants to hang out with me, I'd be stoked to hang out with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I go for days and not speak to like people other than outside of work.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm in the same boat, man. It's like when I find someone that's like kind of that's cool that wants to hang out, I'm like
Yep.
oh hell yeah, you want to hang out? And when they leave, I'm like, you sure you want to leave? You
Yeah.
can
Like,
stick
you
around
sure
a
you
little
don't
longer.
stay? Yeah. Let's one more drink.
Nice. All right. So hopefully, if you pull me over in Ohio, just let me off. Don't give me a ticket.
There you go.
Next question is the best mobile stand and sticks, the pros and cons of those, and single fold down steps versus double fold down steps. So we'll take the first part first. We'll do that. We'll be logical. Best mobile stand and sticks. What are the pros and cons of like the high end mobile stands and sticks?
So I really do like my Lone Wolf custom gear stand and sticks. Super lightweight. I love that the seat feature folds up and makes a shelf for my backpack. That was always a problem, is getting your backpack slung over and getting it to stay in that position,
No doubt.
So I dig that. And I think with the way that seat flips up so for me, I'm going in with a camera arm and camera gear and that kind of stuff. And that camera arm is always mounted on the side of a pack, not always on the inside. So my load is not usually even distributed anyways. So with having that shelf, that I'm really looking forward to that. And that's going to be super awesome. And it's lightweight. So that's going to be cool.
Right.
On a price point model for traditional stand and sticks, I simply just don't think you can beat XOP.
Right.
XOP and Lone Wolf Custom Gear both have that extended length on their steps, so it kicks out and curves up a little bit. So it's longer than the traditional Lone Wolf portable tree stand sticks. I have slipped off, you get muddy boots and whatnot, and those trees are at an angle. So I'm huge on that. I mean, I can't say that I don't like Lone Wolf portable tree stands. I used to work with those guys, but they're all Andre's patents, and
right.
XOP is cheaper than Lone Wolf portable tree stands. In my opinion, it's better. There's improved properties. And then Lone Wolf Custom Gear is a little more high end, but it's super, super lightweight. So if like you're the guy that's going to go in and out every time and set up and tear down every time, you essentially only need one stand. Why not spend the extra money and have a little bit nicer piece that's lighter? Now for you, I mean, I know that you're more of the saddle guy.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you kind of have a little bit different approach.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's I'm a saddle guy through and through at this point, but I'm not naive to say that stands don't have their place in an arsenal. You know what I mean? It's like I hunt out of my saddle like 95% of the time, but when I come to Iowa, it's like I'll have a stand in the truck, just in case, right? Because there might be a place that I just want to go in, I want to hang something, I want to let it. And then what I typically do is I'll hunt out of the saddle, out of the stand. That way I can still use the platform the same way. But for me, it's like I kind of fall in a similar camp to you. I think a lot of the top quality stands that are out there now, whether it's, again, to your point, it's like Lone Wolf Custom Gear. They did a great job coming up with something that I think if you're a mobile stand hunter, like you should just ante up and get the Cadillac. You know what I mean? Because it's going to last you for a long time, and it's really the tool that you probably really need. As far as price point goes, I'd be right there with you. It's like I think the stands, Lone Wolf and XOPs are similar to your point. They're all Andre's patents, so you're still getting an Andre designed stand. And XOP, yes, is a better price point. And I think to your point that they have made some modifications that kind of elevated a little bit in terms of some of the features and stuff like that. Because I've hunted out of both, right? It's like I've hunted out of those because Chad runs all XOPs, and I've run a Lone Wolf, and so I've got to kind of use both. And XOPs stand toe to toe, and if price points a thing that you're looking at, then I think XOP is the obvious choice. As far as sticks go and stuff like that, I modded my sticks this year, and so I took some old Lone Wolf sticks and cut them short. And on the question of fold down steps or a single or a double, in my opinion, if you can do the double, then I would do the double. I'm just finding it to be a lot more convenient to have a double step, at least on the top. So I've actually, on my mods, took the single step off and put a permanent double step on the top of my sticks, which has been nice. But if I had it to do over again, I'd probably get a stick that has the fold down, double version. I know Hawk Helium makes a really good double version step that a lot of people like, and is really easy to mod to make a short stick if that's what you're into. As far as and we'll flip this, I know, because you mentioned, I'm a saddle guy. I think the pros and cons of saddle versus tree stand is just, what are you looking for? If you're comparing them to tree stands, or both of them can get the job done. It just depends on what you want. It's, I don't think, my personal opinion is I don't know that a person who's a good deer hunter is going to kill any more or less deer out of either of them, other than maybe they're more confident in one over the other. So that might be the reason why they get it done. As far as saddles go, in terms of comparison, I think there's I don't think there's terrible saddles out there. Just like I don't think there's terrible stands or terrible bows when you get to the high end stuff. They're all pretty comparable. They're doing a good job of advancing the technology. But for me, it's I use a tethered, saddle because, when I was doing my diligence and doing my homework, the guys who were making it were important to me. The fact that they were veterans of saddle hunting, even though it was, everyone thought it was kind of this new trend that's been around for a long time, and they've been in the game for 10 to 20 years, some of them, and so they've done all the DIY stuff to do all the learning. They're making their own stuff to figure out what worked and what didn't work. So there's a ton of knowledge that they had outside of just the gear that they could share with, new saddle hunters to help them with their learning curve. And then it's the lightest on the market. And those dudes put out tons of content to help the saddle community. And that was really kind of what sold me, was that and the safety aspect of it. The only other thing I'll add is steps. I've changed this year too. It's I'm probably going to be using some wild edge steps this year with a cane method of climbing, which is more of a pull-up method, and using a rigger's belt to clip into steps as opposed to a lineman's belt, so I'm not dealing with branches and stuff. So that's the other thing that I'm, kind of making a move to. So even for tree stand hunters, it's I wouldn't discount other climbing mechanisms, especially if you like the familiarity with a tree stand, but maybe you want a climbing mechanism that's going to be a little lighter or whatever to lighten your load. If that's what you're looking for, then there's other climbing options out there that you could look at, whether it's steps or whatever the case might be, that you can kind of bundle them together. So I don't want people to think that they can only use, if they have a stand, they can only use sticks. It's no, there's a lot of options that you can use for climbing, and find the right thing that's going to work for you and your setup. So I don't know that there's necessarily hard and fast pros and cons, other than, get out there and just try a bunch, man. It's that's what I did this summer. It's I tried all kinds of climbing methods this summer to try to figure out what it is I was going to use. And I kind of landed on, for early season, when I don't have a lot of bulk and clothes on, I'm using wild edge steps with a cane method. Whenever it gets cold and I don't have as much flexibility, I may end up transitioning to my short sticks, just because, I feel a little bit more comfortable on those, and might feel a little safer in using those whenever I'm not as flexible. So I don't know. Anything else to add? Is there anything I missed?
No, I mean, that's pretty much got it covered. I like the double sticks too. Sometimes however I ascend is not how I might descend.
Hmm.
So sometimes you do that stupid little tree stick shuffle where you like rotate from your left foot to your left foot, like
Yeah,
ho,
yeah. Like if you started, like if you know when you start, you're like, man, I need to start on my right foot because I need to end on my left foot at the top so I can step in to my
Uh-huh.
stand and to the right.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know how many times I've done it and I've got up to the top and I've got the wrong peg and I'm like, son of a, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. 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 It's yeah, um eh, weight has never been like a huge issue for me. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yep.
Like uh now if there's a difference in 10 pounds, sure. But like 2, 3, 4 pounds, I don't know. Like, you know, I
Yeah.
mean,
No, I agree. I agree
it
with
is
you.
what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, I know a lot of people will say, and I mean, I know you've said this too, just like, hit the weights a little harder, which is
Yeah.
completely valid. Right.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of a dick statement from
right.
me,
No,
but
but it's true. You know what I mean? It's like, if the 2 or 3 pounds is going to really bother you, that's like, you might want to think about, hitting the weights or doing something to overcome that. And rather than, changing all your gear up necessarily.
yeah.
For me, a lot of it was, and I didn't realize this until I got into the saddle and started using the saddle, was yes, the weight cut was nice because at this point with my climbing method and my saddle, all my ropes, even if I throw my little camera arm that I have in there, an Ozonics unit in my pack, I'm still at like 15 pounds total, like in my pack.
Right.
And it
Right.
all literally fits in my Fanatic pack. I can put it all in my pack.
Yep.
So, you know me, John. It's like I'm not a big dude. Like I'm not super tall, and so for me, wielding stand sticks that are like half my height, it's a lot for me to try to get through the timber as far as like
Sure.
just the bulk of it. You know
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so for me, that was the biggest difference of transitioning was like, wow, when I walk through the brush, I'm not making as much noise because I don't have as like I'm walking through as my body type going, I can slide through
Mm-hmm.
there. And then when I go to slide through there, it's like, well, my stand got caught, my sticks got caught,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
stuff like that. And now it's like, if my pack makes it through, I won't like, I
Good.
make it through, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Not to say that you can't make it through quiet with other methods as well. And that's why it's like I was saying, it's not a one size fits all. I think everyone has to kind of like experience those things, figure them out, and they'll find the right solution for themselves.
Well, yeah, I mean that's just it. I mean, you just go do it,
Yeah.
and then you figure out like, okay, this is what I need to change or what I need to adjust on, and then also things change too. I mean, you know what, what was the things that I was doing to change my hunting 5 years ago is different from what I'm doing now. It's just always evolving, and that's the beauty of eBay, right?
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
well, I don't need that gear anymore. Sell that and get something different.
Exactly. All right, so I think we covered that one pretty thoroughly. So the next one is this fella writes in and says, "What does your mid to late summer scouting for public land look like?" So you want to take this one first? You want me to take a stab at it?
Well, I'll take a stab because my answer is really, really quick.
Okay.
If it's a new piece, I'm probably going to do it more on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to kind of scout my way in that first day setting up, or scout from afar by maps or something like that. But
Right.
yeah, I don't scout summer property for whitetails like I used to.
Right. Yep.
I just don't. I think you can. People say, oh, well, if you don't, then by the time the hunting season comes and the season started and you haven't done your scouting, you're unprepared and you're like a dog chasing a tail. Maybe,
Yeah.
I don't like chiggers.
Yeah.
So,
Second that.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's just, I mean, I'm not going to pull punches here. Like it sucks. It's 100 degrees. It's humid. You're sweating your butt off. You're out there, tromping around looking for stuff that's not going to look the same that it's going to look in November and December. So let the cameras do more of the work, back it up and scout like you and I did. Scout with snow on the ground, after the season.
Yeah. No, and honestly, my answer isn't going to be too terribly different from yours. I mean, I think I mean, I think there are things that you can do. It's like, look, if you have to put boots on the ground, it's like by all means. I agree with John. It's like I'm not a big fan of doing late summer scouting. A lot of times, if I haven't gotten to a piece in before late summer or before this spring green up when green up gets real heavy, like I'm probably going to let it alone. Like my cutoff is really like May. If I haven't gotten in there like prior to Memorial Day, I'm probably going to let it alone for the most part. Like I'll go in to swap a camera if I need to check it to see, especially if it's a new piece, to see if I'm getting inventory that I was expecting. And that way, if I need to move it, I can move it. But I'm not going in and doing like an all day scout session necessarily. What I will do though is I will look at like OnX and start to look at what are my access points and stuff like that. Where are those areas so I can start to cross some stuff off the list that have easy access, knowing other people are going to use it. I will look at terrain features, you know what I mean, and try to figure out where my saddles are at, where my pinch points are at. If there's some fields around, is there an inside corner I can use? Is there a double inside corner that I can possibly use? I start looking at that kind of stuff to start to earmark quickly, like where are the main points, number one, that are close to entrance that hunters are probably going to get to, and I can know that I can probably cross those off as well, and then look at the secondary kind of terrain features behind those initial easy to get to ones and say, are those ones, what do those look like, and do they look like they're going to be promising? And then if you're really nerdy, like I like to be sometimes, I'll actually look at like historical wind data and start to see like during the course of the year, what's the wind direction and what wind directions would play for those potential terrain features, and then understand like from that perspective, which ones are going to likely play. And then from there, to your point, John, I think, more and more, and you and I've talked about this, we've talked about it together. We've talked about it with Cody. It's like just starting to trust yourself more and go in and scout to hunt and read hot sign and go where the hot sign's telling you.
Sure.
Especially if you found a terrain feature that you really like, whatever the case might be, if it's a saddle that's kind of deep in, then you might look at it and say, all right, cool, I'm going to go check this out. You scout your way in. And then if you see some sign as you're getting closer to this terrain feature, all of a sudden that terrain feature is probably going to be a pretty good spot to set up, right? It's like then you can have the debate whether you set up on the sign or whether you set up in the terrain feature leading to the sign, whatever the case is. But then you're in the game. And that's probably how I would approach it. I would do that from afar work as much as I could and then scout my way through.
Yep, agreed.
But so I think we'll do one last question, man, because I know you got some stuff going on this evening. And I don't want to keep you. And we have a couple more that we'll have to answer. We'll have to cover these off on another podcast. But this one actually was from this guy. I'm going to call him out. He's kind of an asshole. I don't really even like him that much. His name's Johnny Utah Mulligan. And what he wrote in was put me on blast and said, "How big of a buck are you going to kill in Iowa this year?" So I think I'll answer that one first, and you can answer. How's that?
I think here's the deal. You're coming in at the right time. I actually went today and finally sat down, introduced myself to the Shimmick Foresters. Mm-hmm. You are hunting. You're going to have access to 6,200 acres.
Sweet. Love it.
Yeah. And, I might have mentioned this on a podcast before. I have run up to 9 cameras at one time in Shimmick, and I have had one picture of one human.
Yep.
One. And it's just one image of him. And it was a Pheasant Forever hunter back there. I think he was squirrel hunting, though.
Right.
So, untapped resource. There was a 189 killed out of there last year. There's always a pile of 160, 70s killed out of there. Maybe I shouldn't advertise it that much, but
right. I was saying, like, take it back. And there's no deer there.
There's no deer there. Yeah. None. A couple of raccoons.
Right.
No, but you're going to be in a good spot. And here's the thing: you've got nothing else to do.
Yeah.
So like, it's kind of like when people go to an outfitter and they hunt the morning, then they come in and just hang out in the lodge the rest of the day. Like, you're here for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You sit bell to bell and you grind it and you hang and bang and move around. You're going to get a shot at a solid 4, 5, 6-year-old buck. It's going to happen, so I'm very, very confident that you're going to have success this year. So I'm excited for you, actually.
Yeah, man, I'm fired up, dude. I'm pumped. It's like I keep thinking about it. I try to like keep myself in check as far as like what my expectations are and stuff like that. And so to answer the question pointedly, for me, I want to kill a 185-inch deer because I know 180-inch deer around every tree in Iowa.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
Of course.
so no, I mean, honestly, I want to shoot a mature deer.
Yep.
My goal is to shoot a deer that's from a maturity perspective that I wouldn't necessarily get the opportunity to shoot in Pennsylvania, right? So, I would like to shoot a 4.5 or older. That would be kind of my goal. But I would be lying if I told you if 145, 150-inch deer walked by if I didn't stick an arrow in it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I'm trying to go in and let it be fluid and just, and know that like, I don't want to shoot a 130 or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like I waited 4 years for the tag. I would like to shoot something that I might otherwise not be able to get an opportunity at in Pennsylvania. And I don't know what that score means. I'm hoping the old heart rate will tell me when it's time to release an arrow. But from the sign that I saw and the terrain that that you kind of walked me through whenever I was out there, it's like there's a couple really good setups that I think are going to have an opportunity to produce, and I'm excited for it. So
I can't wait to get the text message from you and you're like, dude, I just smoked one. And then I'm going to go, cool. I'm sitting till dark. I'll meet you later.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing was, I was talking to someone about it because they were like, what do you do? They don't hunt. And they were just asking me questions about it. And I was like, they were like, well, what do you do when you get one? I was like, well, usually I field dress it and then I'll drag it out or whatever. And they were like, well, what happens in Iowa? Are you going by yourself? I was like, well, I'm going by myself. I was like, but my buddy lives out there. And I was like, we're not hunting together per se. I was like, but he lives right around the corner from where I'm hunting. We'll probably see each other just about every day. Mm-hmm. And they were like, well, what if you get one out there? And I was like, well, I had to stop for a second. I was like, wait, these aren't Pennsylvania-sized deer. I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to wait till dark until he's done hunting to come help me drag it out.
Yeah.
Like,
which dude, I'm telling you, like, you have no idea how excited I'll be to help you drag a deer out. Dude, that's going to be so awesome. I'm looking forward to it, dude.
Yeah. I might be drunk when you get there. Just FYI.
I've been known to pick up heavy things a time or two, so I'll gladly do all the work and let you enjoy the celebration.
Right. Nice. Well, cool, man. I'll let you, I know you got some stuff going on tonight because I know you just getting back from that trip. You're still trying to dig out of some things. And I know you're getting ready to hit the road to the Deer Assoc here tomorrow too. So don't want to keep you. Thanks for jumping on. We'll get the second half of these questions on the next episode. So until the next time, folks, thanks, y'all. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, of course. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast while you're there. That'd be super rad if you'd be able to do just those two things for me. And before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, Gumleaf USA Boots, Obsession Bows, Ramcat Broadheads, Trophy Taker Rests, and Dead Down.
November's on my heels, makes me proud, makes me steal. I could show you through the door, I ain't welcome anymore. A long time coming, if it all, it takes a special knowing to color for damaged heads, broken letters. Rationalize yourself in numbers, but I